Oh, a cat already? Kiki might be on mute. Also, the chat says they can't hear us, so I'm working on that. So apparently everyone can hear me, but they can't hear everyone else. So I'm failing at this end. So we're working on it. In the meantime, just, I guess, keep talking amongst ourselves. I don't know. It's weird. My Zoom's being dumb. Okay. Sorry. Whoa.
easy.
How are things in Canada? Like we've been talking a lot. We've featured a few people from the UK, but mostly we've been featuring science communicators in the US specifically. How are things in Canada? Is it crazy up there, or is everyone just like staying true to the stereotype and being ultra polite during like the craziest crisis of our lifetime?
Yeah, it is. It's good. I think you're gonna find everything from soup to nuts, really. But my experience has been very chill and very typically Canadian, and I have not had any issues with getting, groceries or anything like that. But I mean, our schools are closed, our essential services are closed, or non-essential. I mean, and we are essentially. I stay home. I don't really go out other than to go out for a walk or things like that, and I haven't seen friends and things like that. So, but yeah, we're pretty chill. It's
Yeah.
nice to be here. We have space, we have beautiful air and beautiful water.
I know like Trace is still working on
I am.
YouTube volume problem, but I want to shout out like Trace brought this up last week, and it goes to exactly what you're saying. Like I haven't seen friends in forever, like outside virtually. Like virtually, I'm connecting with as many people as possible. But I think we were talking here a couple weeks ago. I think someone said like I just want to hug, like like
That sounds like
I
something I would
just
say.
want to hug. And Trace launched a series this week on his YouTube channel about touch and like how much touch is important to us and drives like our emotional state, and how intense this whole period is, where we literally the way we fight the disease is to stop touching each other to a certain extent. And it was awesome. I don't know, Trace,
So
are you
great.
able to talk about it?
I think if people can hear me
Now I
now,
can't hear Trace.
You're muted now.
so you can't hear me, but the
you are
YouTube
muted.
can hear me.
I
That's
know.
so
I
weird.
think he's saying we can't hear him, but YouTube can hear him.
That is correct.
Maybe.
That is what I was saying. And now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Everybody can hear me! I'm so sorry. I don't know what the heck is going on. Okay, so we're talking about my new Touch series? Is that what we're talking about? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Sounds so
What
cool.
did you want to know?
No, I was just saying, like, it came up a couple weeks ago on this stream. Like, we can't really touch each other, and that's what I was just shouting it out, and I didn't know if you wanted to say anything.
Yeah, and so I used to do a podcast called Science Plus, and I thought this would be a good time to try it again. I can't leave the house. I'm going to be here all the time. I may as well try and make like a really long series of videos on one topic. And a friend of mine and I were talking. He lives in the Bay Area, and he hasn't touched another person. Now we're looking at 2 months, like since early March, because he lives by himself. He's single, and all of his friends are physical distancing with other groups of people. So he's like outside of a social bubble. So he has nobody to touch. And so I started to think about it, and I was talking to some friends about it, and a lot of people started to express either similar feelings about like people who don't have a partner or a family at home with them, that they kind of miss touching other people. And it's so sad. So I started putting together this series, and the first episode is always kind of rough with me. I'm trying to figure out, this is the first time I've done it, so I'm trying to figure out what to put together. But the first one, it was out physically how touch works, because I sort of thought about it, and I was like, I know like names for structures of the eyes and the ears, and like we know how taste buds work generally, but like we mostly don't know how our fingertips work, like what actually is making them work, right? So that was kind of where I started, and I worked my way all the way to this Sunday is the third video came out today. The fourth video is Sunday, and we have astronaut Scott Kelly in that one. This one today was Diana Klatt, who was on the stream a while back, and she's an epidemiologist and does public health stuff based in New York. And then on, I think, Monday, I haven't decided if it's be Monday or Tuesday, the final video will come out, and I do like touch illusions and things. So like your body will start to take control of items, and you can actually feel them. It's going to be really cool. It's going to be really cool.
That's neat.
Oh, that's freaky.
Yeah.
Well, so each week when we get together, we usually just do a round robin of like a science story, or just like a story that's generally caught your eye that you want to talk about for 5 to 10 minutes. Carin, do you want to go first? Because I'm intrigued by this whole, like, you've spent your entire career studying motherhood. Now,
yeah.
motherhood in slightly wilder creatures than us, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we've like devolved into those wild creatures again.
I don't disagree with you, Kishore. I right now I'm, in addition to teaching my course, I'm taking a course called Journalism in the Pandemic. And it's taught by Marin McKenna, who's a really prominent communicator. Yeah,
Shout out to Marin, one of the best science journalists going.
Totally. The course is amazing. It's also free, by the way. But it's, yeah, anyway, so one of the students in the course posted a video last week that just moved me so much. And it wasn't about the animal kingdom, which is generally where I go, but this is one that I actually presented to my students this week because I found it so moving. It was about motherhood, and it was about a woman in Mombasa, Kenya, who had 8 children. And her most recent one was less than a year old, and the father had been killed last summer somehow. And this woman was every night boiling stones on the stove to fool her children into relaxing and falling asleep so that they would go to sleep at night because she didn't have any food. No food. Yeah, like just like pull your guts out, kind of like, how is this happening? Like, this woman has 8 children and no food. Like, anyways, that was tough. The story was tough, but the piece of journalism that was presented was so compelling, and it was told in a very simple way, very simple narrative. And the story had like somewhat of an ending because a lot of neighbors and other people showed up for this woman and made sure she was taken care of at the end. But for how many other people are in a similar situation, and it's so strange to think that here I am with my 4 children. We are not wanting for anything. We have everything that we need. I have access to safe, clean supplies. And it's so strange to consider our own existence as moms, as people, as community members, in ways like that. So I think good pieces of journalism really have such a powerful impact in ways like that.
So I saw some polls recently that we've seen this like rash of protests in North America and mostly in the U.S. And some of them seem like really bad faith, like people that are being sort of paid to be out there. They're protesting lockdown. But there also seems to be a set of people that are really frustrated and scared. And one of the polls I saw was on food insecurity, like people's ability just to provide food for their families, and the kind of unpredictable ways people act when that kind of threat shows up. And it struck me, like, as you were telling that story, as somebody that studied, the biology of different, animals as they approach motherhood, it really struck me as that kind of situation where people are going to take a lot of different strategies, but probably strategies we've seen across species. I don't know if you agree with that sentiment or not.
I absolutely do. And it's interesting in a way. It's almost, dialing it back into the basic biological needs that we have, like gone are any of the frills and gimmicks that humans are so used to having and like just living with without even thinking about. And in a way, we've gotten so used to living comfortably that to live non-comfortably is much harder than it once would have been, perhaps. So yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment. And another area that I've seen that in my work, sort of looking at psychology and humans, is in the addictions space. When humans sort of succumb to the disease of addiction, it's almost as though the basic needs of survival are all that is getting met every single day. And that's an interesting and strange phenomenon to think about.
I've often wondered about what would happen, or it is the phenomenon that we have culture and that we consider ourselves cultured because we do have things taken care of. And the whole pandemic and the potential for distribution supply lines to be shut down. Oh my God, what are we going to do without any toilet paper? But even beyond that, food and the basic needs. What if the electricity stopped working? What if it turned into a scenario where it was much, much worse and many, many more people's basic needs were not being met. What would that mean for society? And could we maintain our civility? That's like, I all these thoughts kind of dogpiled in that direction for me. I mean, I like to think that at the base level, we're all good and we're all going to help each other. But then you sometimes wonder.
Thanks for my friend Will Smith, who just rated our Twitch channel with like 70 viewers. Happy birthday, Will, by the way.
It's Will's birthday.
Happy birthday, Will.
Will.
Happy birthday.
On that front, like I know there's so much emphasis on the biological research right now, the vaccine research, the virologists, even the epidemiologists. But like what we're talking about is like the domain of social science, like human behavior. And it's like, I remember early on, like reading a story about when we cut some of the funding to the pandemic response office, like the one unit that I was like, that was interesting. There was a social and behavioral science unit within the pandemic response team. And I was like, I remember like really early on being like, why is that there? And then when you start to think about it, it's like so much of what we're going through is not going to be dictated by the biology. It's all going to be like dictated by like the social and behavioral sciences. And it's like this incredible time to focus on the social science aspects. I saw the most ridiculous tweet yesterday from Justin Amash, the Republican representative, who's saying like scientists can't predict all of these human behaviors, and we're like, actually, we have all branches of science that work on that.
Pardon me. Hello. And then the
social science Twitter was like,
the scientist peeks out from behind the wall and is like, interesting, and like.
It's like, finally, did somebody call the social scientist's name?
Yeah. Oh man.
That's funny.
Yeah. God, I sometimes wonder about the morale leading into situations like that. As we were talking about, as you were saying, Kiki, like you'd like to hope everybody would act in such a way, just sort of take it back to the resources question, but we're not seeing that necessarily, and I'd like to think that too, but I'm not sure that I believe it. And I'm wondering where in the animal kingdom, kind of like where we might see that. I mean, do we see that in the primate world? I wonder
there's the female dominated primate populations, the bonobos, and chimpanzees that are ruled by the females. There are a few groups that I've heard of that are kinder and more sharing than other groups. Yeah.
But then living in this level of stress and like sort of the social science part that you were talking about, KISHORE, those are complex animals. Like they're very complex brains. I mean,
all of this just makes me more empathetic to like the weird, crazy choices people are going to make.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I mean,
and so like when I bought the
Maslow's
gallon, I was going to say when I bought the gallon of ice cream last night, I had a lot of understanding for myself.
I empathize with you. I empathize with that decision to buy a gallon of ice cream. I'm empathizing. I want
My
ice cream
husband
too.
likes buying gallons of alcohol, rubbing alcohol.
Oh.
We were like, oh, cool, yeah, sure, say, yeah. Oh, rubbing alcohol. That's
Rubbing
weird.
alcohol.
That's weird.
Commentary on my drinking for a second.
Isopropyl alcohol.
Oh, what is that even for? Is that even helpful during a pandemic?
Yeah, we've got like a mister over our front door.
I love the idea that like if you go to Arizona this summer, all the misters have been converted to just spraying hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
This
mister brought to you by Lysol.
No. This is 100% like made up. This
Made
is
up.
not
Don't do this.
information.
For a second,
It does-
because I was like, oh.
Maybe.
I mean, technically, it would cool you down. You know.
Yeah.
It would,
It evaporates even faster than water, so
For a
that's
hot
good.
second.
That's funny.
Well, I mean, I have a question for you guys on the basic biology of all these things. Then, what do you guys think about all of this response that the humans have been doing to the virus? Are we just making ourselves busy? Or like, do you think we have a shot at something? Or when it comes right down to the basic biology of microbe or virus versus mammal, what do you think?
Well, so I have a couple of responses to this. So first, I want to start all of these by saying I don't know, because I think like it's so important just to embrace like the uncertainty of the moment and not
Yeah.
be like beaten down by that uncertainty, but being okay with that uncertainty.
Yeah.
The microbes have been winning for a really long time. We just don't admit to it. They've outnumbered us. They've lived on this planet longer. They're going to outlive us on this planet and elsewhere in the universe too. So I don't think it's this like kind of battle that is uh, that we have been dominating. Like this has been we're the ones that are coming from behind, I would say. I have a lot of hope around our long term prospects around this in terms of the basic biology of fighting it, because we had done a lot of work on similar coronaviruses, especially like MERS, in terms of
Mhm.
progressing towards a vaccine. And then the funding got cut, so we didn't actually progress to that. And it seems like, I was reading a preprint today about a challenge study based off the vaccine from Oxford that showed in 6 macaque monkeys that they had resistance for. Like we should not take any lessons from one preprint study on a challenge study in 6 monkeys. But
Mechanics.
yeah, at the same time, it's like it is progress, and it is progress at a speed in science that I didn't think was possible. So while I think there's going to be hills and valleys, like I don't think this is going to be a smooth ride to getting to a therapeutic or a vaccine. Like we also should say there's been a lot of pre-work done that we're building off of. We didn't just start from like block number one where we're like, what is a virus again? And like, no, we had done a lot of work
Yeah.
that has queued us up. Now, that doesn't mean that the next steps are going to be easy, but that's my sort of quick take.
Yeah, I mean, number one, I think as humans, we've been up against the looming specter of climate change, and people are we going to do something? I don't know if we can do anything. Oh, who am I? I'm just a person. I can't do anything. And then this pandemic happened and flattened the curve, and people are staying home. And I just hope that people can take that nugget of truth of what people together can do and hold on to that, because I think that will take us further together, right? um, as far as behaviorally, we're buying ourselves time for a vaccine or a treatment or something to happen. That's all we're doing. We're buying ourselves time. We're buying the people who create infrastructure time to put infrastructure in place. We're not going to defeat this thing. I mean, maybe we'll come up with a vaccine. There, like Kishore was alluding to, there are 80, somewhere around 80 different vaccines under investigation right now, and it's fully because of resource allocation. It's because everyone in the world said we need to get this taken care of, and it's not like, oh, we have one lab over here that's underfunded that's trying to come up with a vaccine. People say, oh, well, we never got a vaccine for SARS. We never got a vaccine for MERS. And it's like, because there was no money after after those pandemics stopped, the money was taken away. And if we can keep the resource allocation, the people allocation, the money allocation, make it happen, I mean, yeah, maybe we will do it.
There was a great video. Yeah, it would be. It would be wonderful if we could do that. There was a great video put out by Seema Yasmin. She's a health sciences researcher and a science communicator based out of Stanford, and she's been doing a video series for Wired. And she talks about like the typical cycle of like funding and how research progresses during a pandemic. And one of the things she noted is that there's usually this cycle of an influx of money to deal with the acute crisis of the pandemic and neglect for a whole other host of things. And then the pandemic, once it passes, will go through a period of neglect when we go back to thinking about stuff. So like dementia, Alzheimer's, those things aren't going away. They're still killing millions of people. they're affecting our way of life. That hasn't changed from 3 months ago to now. And so how we balance all of these decisions where there isn't like any rubric to make this decision, we have to make a bunch of hard choices, will be, I think, will be a fascinating thing to observe. And having people's attention on it, like globally, will, I think, result in some more interesting progress on it too.
I also think that it shows us that, basically our economy and the stock market and everything that capitalism is built on is a sham. Because if they can print as much money as they want to prop things up and give us stimulus checks and do, make it go, why can't we print more money for climate change? Why can't we print more money for Alzheimer's research? Why can't we print more money for all the vaccines? I mean, why can't people always have universal basic income? Why can't our needs be taken care of so people aren't fearful and angry? If our needs are taken care of, we don't have to worry. We can be bonobos.
That seems like a good life.
I want to be that. Come on.
Kiki for president.
Is it the
An argument.
is it the bare ass part of the bonobo like that's attractive? What's attractive about that lifestyle, Trace?
Oh, it's that they have sex all the time.
Yeah, they have sex all the time.
They're hanging out. The women are in charge.
Yeah.
They have sex all the time. They're all vegetarian.
They're just like, hey, we made a good deal. You guys want to like go have a little sex and seal it up? And everybody's like, yeah, this sounds really fun. And then we'll go have a nap.
Yeah.
It'll be great. Sounds awesome.
All combos, all numbers, 1 on 1.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4.
Get it. Just get it.
Go have. Get rid of. So that is true.
I think we're painting an overly rosy picture of bonobo society. by the way.
Well, probably, but it's worth comparing in that sense to chimpanzees, which can be very violent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I prefer to exhibit bonobo, at least in my,
Fair.
general pattern. But to your point about the evolutionary, what you're saying, I think for me, both of you, is sort of very evolutionary because, Stephen Hawking always maintained that, climate change is something we won't allocate enough resources to until we really need to. And I mean, it's a biological principle. We will not do anything until we absolutely have to. Why? Because a cheater will always win. If everyone's lining up to do their part in their little orange squares at the store, and then somebody zooms up to the front with their cart, usually somebody, well, if you're Canadian, somebody will always let you in, and on traffic or whatever. And so a cheater will always win, right? And that's that's how humans work. And until that's, I don't know if that can ever be different. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that is also part of the biology of this situation, right? Is that like there's never been a time in the history of, well, pretty much any animal that I can think of that they're like, guys, we all need to do this thing. And then all the animals are like, cool, let's do it. Like, yeah. Never has happened. It's always like some of the animals realize that maybe that they'll survive if they do this thing. And by realize, I mean like evolutionarily are forced that way over potentially millions of years. But it's like there's always an offshoot group. There's always another group that tries a different strategy. And in this case, a lot of us, like, according, if you believe the US numbers at least, something like 60% or more of people believe that we should be inside. And most people, like even more than that, closer to like 4 out of 5 people, are staying and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And that's a pretty good number, right? Those are pretty good numbers.
We should contextualize that. Like, you can't get 4 out of 5 people to agree on much of anything.
Which toothpaste is good, yeah. Dentists, that's what I was thinking too. Dentists.
Even that's a biased poll.
Dentists will agree on everything though. If you just go ask dentists, what do you think? Color, favorite color? Pink. 4 other dentists are like, yeah, I agree, pink.
I think there was an XKCD about this week about what 4 out of 5 people actually will agree on. So 81% will say they enjoy apple pie. 84% have a favorable impression of Tom Hanks. So it's like it's hard to get if you can't get people to agree on Tom Hanks. Like that's really high that we've done that for saying.
Are we gonna like judge now? We're gonna set the calibration curve for human agreement on Tom Hanks.
That seems like
to be.
That seems like a really good line.
Well, as
Didn't
Duck
like
Duck
that.
Goose brings
Everybody
in as Duck Duck Goose brings up in the chat, it was only 76% feel positively about kittens. Tom Hanks overperforming kittens.
Kittens.
Wow. If you can reach the Hanks threshold, I think you're doing great. You're doing great no matter what you're doing.
It was probably Castaway that didn't.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, Mr. Rogers. Wow, that's like the Rogers bubble if you can get outside of it.
Yeah.
I also won't accept anyone saying anything negatively about Steve Rogers or about Steve Rogers.
Well, you can. I mean, there's a lot negative to say about Steve Rogers. Okay.
Kiki, how about you? What science sort of caught your eye this week?
Oh, this week I have been having some really good conversations about the misinformation and disinformation that is beginning with respect to the COVID-19 vaccine that does not yet exist. So Plandemic came out last week. There was a big old pile of lies and was removed. It was removed from a whole bunch of platforms because it was a big old pile of lies and would potentially hurt people because it was saying things about that like wearing a face mask actually activates the virus, and that by social isolating you're actually more likely to get infected. And there were very interesting bits of information that were given out, but the whole story, even if you don't believe all the things that are said with relation to face masks and the virus and how it works, there is this sliver of doubt that it tries to insert with respect to the pharmaceutical industry and Fauci and and what the government is telling us right now. So the idea that that we're being fed lies, that all of what we're being told about COVID is a bunch of lies, and that it's being done, that it's a big Democratic plan to destroy the economy and to keep Trump from getting into office. That basically the whole pandemic was a Democrat plot to keep Trump from getting reelected. Now,
I think we as science communicators, I mean, our job, at least for me, I see it, inject science literacy into the population, because like exactly what you're saying is true, and it's hard when people believe something and don't have the tools with which to actually evaluate it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so there were a few different ways because there's this, and then the distrust that is already starting to be sown around the vaccine that is under development. And there are a few different things. There's the fast narrative that we're accelerating the development of the vaccine, and that this fast tracking by the FDA, all these words make you go, ooh, are they going too fast? Is it going to be safe? So like the speed of it, where it's exciting to those of us who understand, like we were talking before, the resource allocation, the fact that there's so much happening right now, we're more likely to get a positive effect. We're more likely to get a vaccine. The reality is, like, people who don't know how it works, they're going to not trust it because, maybe they're going too fast. And so we need to kind of balance that frame with the frame of, well, it might be fast, but it's also going to be good. Mm-hmm. They're not doing it cheaply. They're putting a lot of money into it. These are good scientists who are working to help humanity. And so, like, try and, if you can't pick, pick 2 out of 3, right? Fast, cheaper, good. I pick fast and good. So I think we need to reframe it. And then I was talking with Ben Young Landis yesterday, and he was talking about the whole manufacturing process of vaccines and how most people have no idea how vaccines are made. So he was saying maybe we could relate it to something like the process of making a car. Mm-hmm. Most people go and they buy cars, and they have an idea of that manufacturing process down the line and how the cars are made. And every time a new car is made, it's not like they've made a new car from scratch. They know how cars generally work, and the engineers kind of tweak some things and they make a new car. But it takes time from the planning to the refitting of
Right.
the factories to the actually getting it out where you can buy it. And that's what's happening with the vaccine. We're not making a brand new vaccine because we know about vaccines and how they work. But the manufacturing steps, things have to be done in a slightly different way because this is a different virus.
Yeah, I think it's fun. I love that analogy. Like, you know me,
Yeah.
you guys know me. I love an analogy. If I can come up with an analogy, that's good. And
Yeah.
it's almost like, it makes me think of imagine if you own a, like, you have vested interest in new cars, and then all of a sudden the laws of physics changed. You still know how to make cars, but
Yeah.
like, friction is different, air moves differently, it moves differently on the road, like how the gas is powering the engine works differently. They're all still there, but they're just a little different. Now you have to figure out how to design a new car that will work and do it as soon as possible. Right?
Yeah.
That's the point, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you change one thing, and this one thing is something we've never seen before, and in the case of your analogy of the car manufacturer, it'd be like if the laws of physics were just tweaked a little bit in every way. It's like it would take them a minute figure out what was wrong, what changed in all the different laws of physics. Now we
Yeah.
have to redesign all these different pieces, put them into practice, build them, and get them out. And then you've built one. But you built one,
Yeah.
right?
You built one.
So now we built
make
one.
More.
Like, Kitty and Child. And so it's just like, now we have to figure out, think about how long it's taken for something, and, you know, I'm going to use the T word here, but like, imagine how long it's taken for Tesla to get market penetration. And this is a vehicle that many people have wanted, and the people who did want it before it existed were just foaming at the mouth to like suck in an EV of some kind, right? There were documentaries about GM killing the EV. Like, people wanted electric vehicles for decades, and it has still been slow. It's still been slow to penetrate the market because it takes so long for things like this to work.
This is one of those things that strikes, like, I feel torn about aspects of this. Like, when I see pandemic, I feel like I'm on like a weird Groundhog Day loop. With There's been other like documentaries and big misinformation kind of campaigns mounted in the past, so it doesn't feel different. And I feel the cycle of like scientists getting like really antsy and angry and being like, we can't let this happen. And the focus tends to be about debunking that piece. And I feel like we don't always walk away with the lesson of like, what is that piece doing? Like, what is it tapping into that exists within a segment of the population that we're not talking to about? And like, and fundamentally, people are scared, and they, rightfully or wrongfully, and I kind of actually side on the rightfully, have distrust of organizations like pharmaceutical companies, especially if you go through like the healthcare system in the U.S. Like, there's reasons to be mad at organizations like that. And they're tapping into those like emotional reactions and long held beliefs by people around that. And so I think there's lessons in storytelling that we should be taking and making proactive storytelling around. So I love the manufacturing principle. And like, the place that I'm torn is, I don't know, like, I feel every day like a barrage of information is coming at me. And like, thinking about like unleashing the next barrage of information on this like all these publics that are out there, in order for them to get behind where we need to go, feels challenging to me too, because there is just so much information out there.
I wonder if it'll ever be kind of cataloged or archived in the future. I think a lot about what it might look like, you know, as future generations kind of look back at it, because it's true. I feel so overwhelmed by every aspect of it. Every night I kind of just want the Coles notes. So I guess we all have our little favorites that we go to. But yeah, it seems strange. I know there's all this background going on, and I don't want to focus on it, but it's making me quite uneasy that it's all out there, and I am not focusing on it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think sometimes though, I think you don't have to focus on it specifically by, you know, countering someone's argument specifically. Sometimes it's enough to say, hey, there are a lot of scientists out there who are, who have found things that don't say what you're saying, and if you want to talk about it, I'm
Mm-hmm.
here.
So yeah, I think that's the thing that I would like to kind of put out from this, because we've been talking a lot about it kind of within ourselves, but if people were going to take away something from this discussion about it, I think the biggest one is exactly what you're saying, is like, be available to talk about it. People are going to believe what they're going to believe regardless of what science communicators say, because they may not have trusted science communicators prior. Like, they're not going to just suddenly trust them because like scientists and doctors, and like there are plenty of people in the US who don't even trust doctors, right? Like they don't trust any, as Asimov said, right? Like, my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. Like, it doesn't matter what people believe, what people actually know. It matters what they believe. And so I think being present for people who want to learn more is so important. I think of a friend of mine who I would tell you, you probably know her, but she's a science communicator. I don't want to tell her story without her permission, but she had a friend who was an anti-vaxxer, and she made herself available to that person. And she said, like, look, I've done a lot of research on this, and I know it's a scary topic if you don't know that much about it, and I'm happy to talk about it. And at first it wasn't too much movement, but over like a year, now that person is vaccinating their kids, and it's like they have completely come around. They still don't trust pharmaceutical companies, and I think that is something that, like KISHORE said, and like we mentioned before, is something that maybe not is probably a smart move, but like it just, you have to be present, you have to listen, and be able to like meet people where they are.
Yeah, that's great.
And then you can slowly walk them to the the truth.
Right, and you don't approach them as a science communicator, you approach them as a friend. You approach them as a family member. You approach them, hey.
With a drink.
With a drink.
I actually have a story that I want to talk about that is like this in practice, at scale. So I want to tell you about San Francisco did a study, and they were trying to do a study of what the prevalence of COVID-19 was in certain parts of the city. And so they took this really specific census tract in the Mission District of San Francisco. And in that area, which is about 4 blocks, there's about 8,000 residents total in that area. 58% of them were Latinx, and 34% of them had household incomes under $50,000. What they were noticing at the hospital is that the large percentage, it was about 74%, of the hospital admits for COVID were Latinx people. And so they're like, let's go to one of the highest proportion Latinx communities in the city and see what the heck is going on if we just sampled everyone. And so what they did was, instead of being like, hey, we're a university doing sampling, they actually partnered with the city and formed a committee of leaders from that neighborhood. And within a week period, they recruited half of the population of those 4 blocks. So over 4,000 people got tested. And over a 3-day period, they tested everyone. It amounted to 30% of the total testing that had been done in San Francisco at that point happened over that one weekend. And it was because these community leaders went out and were like, you got to do this. And they're like, I know you don't like this hospital coming down all of a sudden being like, we need you. And the hospital took an approach that was very much like we're not going to be able to solve this without you. Like, you have to be a part of this. You have to lead on this. And so they actually hired 450 people from that neighborhood to go out and talk to everyone that they could. And here are the results. So they found 2.1% positive rates in that census tract, which amounted to only about 70 people-ish over a population of about 4,000. Of those, 90% of the people that tested positive could not work from home. So they were out working in some way. They were either essential workers or people that had to travel somewhere to work. So they had to go somewhere. And so they're putting themselves at risk. Of the total population, 44% of the total population they surveyed were Latinx, 38% white. of the white population, how many do you think tested positive?
I don't know. 1%?
You know, this is a trap question.
Yeah, 0%.
None. I'm gonna say none.
Yeah.
It is 0. It was
Yeah.
a flat 0. 95% of the people that tested positive were Latinx. And so what the community members were saying was that they knew a problem was happening before the testing was happening because they could see people getting sick. Like
Right.
they knew something was going on. And finally, somebody came and was like, work with us. We hear you. There is something going on here. We need to figure this out together. And what struck me is they did a grand rounds at UCSF where they had the leader of the study, who's this amazing scientist, Diane Havler. She heads their HIV/AIDS unit, and she became a doctor during the AIDS epidemic in San Francisco and led a lot of the like on the ground work, reaching out to the gay community during that time, and like established like an outreach model for public health prevention. And then rose to like leading WHO efforts on this, and now is back leading like the HIV. So she's like not just some doctor or some like she's of some incredible repute, sitting side by side with her community partner. And here's the quote that she had, which I think just kind of sums up everything that I think is interesting and important. She said, "Putting patients first with the disease, having a partnership between the community, the scientific community and academics, and the policymakers is the most efficient way to combat an epidemic." And I think somebody of that stature basically saying like, we are not going to solve the scientific issue ahead of us unless we do it together. And like, we need not only you to be there to participate in studies, we need your like partnership to push this forward. Like, this isn't a science issue. This is a like, we have to work together issue. And that's my like good news. Like, it was totally uplifting to see that because it's a model for how this should work kind of everywhere. And we are seeing it in other places. I don't want to make San Francisco sound like some sort of exception. There are other places things like this are happening. But as BOBAK usually says on this, he's like, KISHORE brings the positivity. That's my like positivity that goes directly to what we were talking about before about like listening to people and being in relationship with them. It makes a huge difference. And I bet that it's going to make a difference to that population's feelings about whether science is working on their behalf long after this pandemic is behind us.
I feel like, big claps, big snaps. I think it's really, really true that working together is what's going to get us places. But for years, we have siloed into these separate places. You know, why do they talk about, you know, the scientific institution, and there's the, you know, the heroic icon of the scientist who is hidden away in the laboratory, never talking to anyone until they've made the brilliant discovery. It's like it goes both ways, right? If you're working with people, you might have better questions and better ways to do your science, and the science may have applications. Science is a human endeavor. Science is a political thing. It's people. It's a process. It's a tool, and it's a part of everything. And we forget that.
Yeah.
I like to examine things, like I like to approach life and issues that we're having as a species with life on different levels of scale. And this is like such a good framework for that, because what you were saying, KISHORE, was that the community scale was included by the scientists. And I mean, it sounds simple to say it, but actually that's a very profound thing as scientists are, you know, busy trying to get their prestigious grants and, you know, do their prestigious studies and things like that. I wonder about the ability of humans to, I don't know, organize themselves on levels of scale that are higher than the community. Because as soon as they went to the community, like that one particular, you know, community, and then they had it, and there was just no other way, as you were kind of alluding to, Kiki, with the echelons of society, how we get more and more and more separated from each other into our different silos. That just speaks to me about the importance of, I don't know, singularity in community, and maybe levels of governance in community that should be more prominent. I don't know.
I remember reading a thing in my American Studies class, I think, about, and I wish I could remember what company this was, but that essentially used behavioral psychology and like social psychology when building out their factory systems. And they recognized that people could only get to know, like, you know, Dunbar's number, you can only know so many people, you can only recognize so many people. It's something, you know, something like in social psychology that plays out in social media as well, like on Facebook and on Twitter and elsewhere where they've done studies. They found people can only really recognize a set number of people before they start to kind of like lose track. And so they built their manufacturing system where like there were little communities, and then the little communities were in a larger thing and a larger thing. And then they would physically create a new building when they hit a certain number. And they'd be like, okay, now there's a new group over here and they will all know each other. So building A and building B won't really get to know each other, even though they both work in the same company. And people would stay longer and they were happier at work. And it was a really interesting study. I'll see if I can find it.
Wow. It's like a human experiment, actually.
Almost, yeah. They were like using that industrial organizational psychology like on a level that was really interesting. And I think it's the same thing as what you're saying, though. It's like, can we organize beyond a community level? Probably not. Can we, and I'm going to use this word as like it's a political thing, like Kiki was saying, we can get a representative from our community to talk to a representative from another community, and you can have the same number of people that are in those communities be representatives, and they all know each other, right? And so it's just like we end up with this graph of people that can do lots of things with lots of people. You know, it just takes a lot of infrastructure to build those things.
And the higher level of organization that wasn't built into that framework, which is where humans are tricky, evolutionarily speaking.
Tricky is very, very nice way to put it.
I mean, it's an opportunity to create that.
Yeah.
You think so, sir?
And maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of human history indicates that society changes after pandemics. So there's reason to believe we can make some shifts. How many? How big? I think that's an open question. But we can't not address like some of the health disparities the racial health disparities that are coming up if we want to be in a different situation. And I heard Ed Yong say it today. He's like, the health of those most vulnerable dictates the health of us all. Right now.
Absolutely.
And I think that if we address just that, I mean, it's a massive issue, but if we just address that coming out of this pandemic, the world will be a much better place.
Yeah.
It has
Speaking,
already...
is it 4? Oh, I was going to say, I've got, speaking to your point though, I've got an interview with Danny Dorland, who has written a book called Slow Down. And it's all about how all the main indicators of society seem to suggest that everything's slowing down, and that capitalism is actually not a steady state, and that it's a transition state to something else. So
I like that.
Interesting.
It's very fascinating. It's a really interesting book, and he's an interesting.
Where's this interview going to be? Where can we listen to it?
It will be on the AAAS podcast, the Science podcast. Yes.
Cool. We've burned through an entire hour. It seems like it's only been 15 minutes, but it's been a whole hour already. So I asked where we could find it, hoping you would plug the giant orange banner behind you as well. So why don't we kind of go around and tell everyone where people can find you, and we'll go ahead with Kiki. Why don't you start?
You can find me on Twitter at Dr. Kiki. I am also found on my podcast, This Week in Science. Look for This Week in Science places. This.org.
What about you, Carin?
Me, I'm just my name. Everything, all my handles and all my everything is just my name. It's Carin Bondar. Besties. Yeah, that's it.
And it's a oldie, but isn't it called Wild Sex? So is the initial
The first book was Wild Sex. The second book was Wild Moms, and the series. Yeah. Same goes for the series as well.
It's on this shelf somewhere.
I know, Trace.
I want to plug the books, but Trace is going to get them.
I've also got this one.
Oh, you have the nature. Wow.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
I like that one.
Version. They were a little afraid of that title. So.
I thought it was good. And of course, you're on my channel, so if you haven't subscribed to my channel, you can do that right now. We do have one question from the chat that I thought would be nice to end on. who are effective organizers? Like, who reaches communities the best? Thad is asking in the chat. And he rules out Tom Hanks for what it's worth, although I think he would probably be a pretty good organizer. If we could, like...
Most people would like him. He would reach a lot of people.
If we could go, like, full Oblivion and just clone a bunch of Tom Hankses, I think we would end up with a lot of, success. But...
So they already exist. These people exist and they're operating. They have different names and roles inside of communities. But if you go to any community and like spend time with them and ask like, oh, who do you know? Like you'll tend to center on like the same few people in that group. And that's who we're talking about. They go by connectors. Sometimes they actually have the title as a community organizer. Sometimes they work for groups, like there's a lot of faith-based groups, there's a lot of nonprofits that...
A lot of local government.
Yeah, completely. So there's millions of community organizers in this country. And there's organizations that support community organizing in specific ways. But I think the place most people encounter it is political campaigns use a lot of community organizers to get their word out, to mobilize. And they're really well connected into a network. Now, that obviously has like a partisan frame sometimes. But by and large, if you spend time in a location, I know that's really hard now, and just ask like, oh, who's the person that everyone knows here? You'll find the community org.
Yeah, that's true. I think I like that you bring up faith-based as well, because growing up in the Midwest, there were 20 churches in my town, and everybody knew somebody at one of them. Like, and it just like we were talking about earlier, they had frameworks of, oh, you go to the non-denominational, you go to the Baptist, and you go to the Methodist, and you go to the Lutheran, but we all know each other because we're all in Boy Scouts, or we're all in Girl Scouts, or we're all go to the same schools. So communities have to be small enough, I think, just by design as well. So the closer you look, the smaller communities you will find as well, and there are connectors in all of those. And if you want to be one of those people, you can be a connector in your community, especially now where you don't have to physically go to City Hall in order to make change. Like, we're starting to make it more egalitarian in that way. Like, this is the time, if you're interested in organizing and you're interested in being part of the solutions, do it.
There are resources out to support those people.
Yeah, and very often, if you wonder, hey, I wonder if if you're in a smaller area and you reach out to an organization and you say, hey, is there anybody doing such and such in my area? Very often they might say, no, you are now.
Yeah.
I would like echo everything all of you guys would say, and I think I often kind of bring things up to an evolutionary level, and I can't emphasize enough taking it back to indigenous cultures and indigenous ways. I think people existed on this planet in harmony with nature for a really long time, and we haven't heard a lot about their ecology in our ecology. So that's just one thing I make in that regard.
Love it.
I want to promote, if you're watching this on my Twitch channel, Wednesday nights, me and my friend Jeff Silverman, we usually do a watch along a movie and talk about the science afterwards. Next Wednesday, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Cool.
Is out. So we get to talk about how much energy does it actually take to melt a Nazi's face.
Wow, that sounds like fun. There you go.
It's very useful information. But thanks everyone for joining us. Where can people Trace? What do you have coming up on your channel next week? You have a couple more videos. On
Sunday is my interview with Scott Kelly about what it's like to be isolated in space for a year. It's going to be really awesome. If you don't subscribe, this is the time to subscribe. It's going to be really cool. I've been editing the interview all day. He gives off really good dad energy. I'm really into this. He's super nice. He's a super nice dude.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone.
Everybody. Bye.
Bye, live people.
Thank you. Bye.
Hi, I forgot to mention Sleeping with Friends. You can find it on Braincraft, on YouTube, on Braincraft. YouTube Braincraft. I'm a judge of a sleep competition. It's awesome.
I can't wait to watch that.
Okay, I'm going to end the stream again.